Chapter 2 44 Hours Until Impact. Justin and John had made their way outside and were about to enter a car. There are 10,000 people who work here. As I'm sure you're aware, getting them all off the planet with the ships we have access to is impossible within 2 days. Currently, there are no inbound passenger ships, nor are there any on the planet currently, stated John. Justin knew John was right. There was no way all those people were getting out of here unless they found another way to deal with this problem. The only ships they had were not designed to carry people. He figured hiding in the mineshafts made by the drills was out of the question. For starters, being on a planet when something like this hits is already dangerous enough, let alone having a gargantuan-sized drill above your head that very well could melt and cover you in molten metal. A CME of this scale is very powerful, after all. You're right about the ships, John. Unfortunately, I don't think keeping them all here is an option either. The CME is going to be too powerful to wait out under any kind of shelter we have access to. We need to evacuate everyone, Justin responded. The real question is how, John replied. The pair got in the car. They closed the doors and air began to hiss as it was filtered through the vehicle. John was in the driver's seat. Where are we headed? Asked Justin. We're headed to the shipyard. I organised to meet the other Solfilius Council members there to discuss the situation further, John replied. Sounds like a good idea to me, Justin replied, satisfied with John's plan. Justin was astonished at how well he was handling all this right now. The news he was delivered earlier was horrible, but right now, he was holding up quite okay. He cared deeply about the safety of others, but what John said to him shook him to his core. He was utmost grateful that he hadn't broken down in that moment. Justin looked out the window at the bleak and draining landscape. It really stirred up a sense of dread in him. Something about it just had a certain horrible energy. It almost felt like a reflection of how he felt just before, and how he continued to feel now. From this part of the planet, he could see the drills better than he could from his accommodation. They were ugly, but it was impossible to deny how impressive they were. All three were at least 30 meters tall. Building something of that proportion was already impressive on Earth, let alone on an isolated planet in interstellar space. They came to the top of a hill. In the distance was a wide slab of concrete with 4 ships on it. All 4 of them were Anklios, cargo ships designed to haul large masses across the interstellar void. In this case, they were being used to haul staminite ore off Solfilius. Next to the large slab of concrete was a small white building. Justin assumed that it belonged to whoever oversaw ship logistics on Solfilius. Alongside the small building was a large hangar. It looked rather empty. The hangar was where the workers maintained the ships. The maintenance wouldn't have been anything excessively complex, however. Most of that would be done on Earth, where there was far greater access to specialist workers and resources due to the complex nature of the ships. We're going to have the meeting in the small white building adjacent to the landing pad. The council meeting headquarters we were in before isn't secure enough for my preference, so it isn't a good place to talk about the emergency, John stated. John pulled up to the building. From this distance, the building looked a lot simpler than the council building. There were already a few cars here, presumably belonging to the meeting participants from the council. John and Justin slipped on their rebreathers and got out of the car. John and Justin stepped up to the office. The door opened, letting them into the airlock room. The airlock cycled and they walked inside. There were multiple people already inside, Justin and John taking the total to 10. The room was rather cramped with all these people in here. The building was clearly only designed to accommodate 3 or 4, maybe 5. The atmosphere was tense, and the amount of people in the room wasn't helping. All the shutters on the windows had been closed. The desks and other furniture already in the room had been shifted to the sides of the office. A large meeting table had been formed in the centre of the room with a few tables to make communication between everyone easier. There were 10 seats at the table, 4 on each long side and 1 at each end. The 8 council members were all seated at the tables. One of them stood up. She was Chinese and had short black hair that came down to her shoulders. She was rather short. She was wearing a similar uniform to John. Justin could only guess that she was quite high up in the ranks. "Good morning, gentlemen," the woman in question spoke. "You must be Justin. My name is Min Robbins. I'm Vice Overseer for Solfilius. Please take a seat. We have a lot to discuss." Min sat back down. Min sounded polite and well-mannered. She came across as a friendly and approachable woman, despite her serious expression in the moment. Justin took a liking to her. Justin took a seat at the foot of the table. Min was seated at the opposite end of the table to Justin on his left-hand side, right next to the table head where John sat. "John, I'll let you take things from here," Min said. John proceeded to walk up to the head of the table and take a seat. "Good morning, everyone. As I'm sure you are all aware, we have a dire situation on our hands. I would like you all to meet Justin. He is here from the Solfilius Orbital Station. He oversees all operations up there and he is an expert in logistical matters," John said, addressing the council. "Good morning, everyone," Justin replied. The council members looked at Justin. A few said hello, the others waved or gave some other polite gesture. None of them smiled in response. Justin didn't blame them for looking unhappy. This was an incredibly serious situation they were discussing. Justin felt very tense and stressed. He imagined they felt the same. The reason this is so serious is because we have no way currently to get everyone off of the planet in time. There isn't enough space on our ships, John stated. "Excuse me, sir, if I may interrupt, but we have 4 Ankylos on the planet right now. Their cargo holds are 30 by 40 meters each. That's got to be able to fit, what, 3,000? Maybe more if we cram everyone in?" questioned a council member. "You are correct, Adam. However, the atmosphere in that section of the Ankylos isn't filtered upon launch. It was only ever designed to hold ore and other types of non-organic cargo. Everyone's rebreathers would run out quickly if they stayed in there. The sections of the ship designed for people are far too small to contain everyone. Unfortunately, that idea is out of the question," another council member replied. That's a good point actually," Adam replied, diving back into thought. "Now everyone, there is some more important information I need to tell you. For the sake of time, I request that you hold off on questions and further discussion until the end," John asked at the council. "Starting from now, we have 43 hours until impact. Time is of the essence, and we must move quickly. My suggestion is we all perform a thorough inspection of the base and piece together a plan with whatever we find that may be of use," John suggested to the council. Justin was impressed by John's ability to hold the room. One last subject before questions and ideas. Everyone on the planet eventually has to find out about the CME. We have 2 options. We tell them now, or we tell them after we formulate a plan. I understand many of you will most likely be divided on what to do, so I just suggest we first discuss and hold a vote. Now, are there any questions?" John asked at the council. No one asked any questions. Justin could only assume it was because they knew what was going on. To be a council member here, you had to be very well organised and well informed about what was going on around you. "Very well then. Does anyone have any ideas they would like to put forth?" John asked. "Maybe it's best if we split off into groups and go look around the facility. It will give us a better idea of what we have access to, and give us a breath of fresh air," suggested one council member. "Phoenix, there's no such thing as fresh air on this planet," another council member joked in reply. They got a couple of smirks and chuckles out of a few people in the room. Phoenix also had a chuckle at their own expense. Even John couldn't help but smile a little. A little humour can go a long way in a situation like this. It helped to relieve tension, and helped everyone relax a little. "Phoenix, I think that is a good idea. Is everyone else in favour?" John asked of the council. Many people in the room replied with a yes or an approving nod. Justin didn't see or hear anyone in disagreement. He also thought this was a good idea. "Very well then. Justin will be with me. We will start in the construction and fabrication warehouse," John stated. Justin had no objections. He knew no one here except for John, albeit not very closely. "Adam, Victor, Aniko, and C, I think you should all be in the same group. You all have technical skills and abilities. I'll let you decide as a group where you should begin your search," John suggested. Yet again, no one had objected to anything said. Justin was astonished at how well this team worked together. He hadn't heard one argument so far. Everyone always seemed on board with each other. Justin figured they would have to be a very well put together team to run a place like this. He suspected when it came time to discuss whether to tell everyone about the CME or not, some debates might start to occur. Phoenix, Min, Dan, and Claire, you all have a wide mix of skills. I will leave it up to you where you search first, suggested John. "Now then, are there any questions or objections?" asked John. "John, when is our next meeting?" asked a council member. Justin couldn't tell who was speaking exactly. There were a lot of people in the room that he didn't know. "We will meet next once one of us comes up with an idea, so then we can discuss it," John replied. After John answered that question, there was silence, and no one had any further questions. "Very well then. That brings us on to the final point of the meeting. Should we tell everyone on the planet about the CME now, or should we hold off until we formulate a plan? John asked of the council. We should keep it under wraps for now. We don't want to cause a panic, stated Adam. I disagree. Anyone who works in the interstellar frontier has to go through some kind of psychological training to prepare them. Panic is unlikely because the people here should know how to deal with it. These people have families and friends, and I don't think they would appreciate being told something like this on short notice, argued another council member. Justin noted that it was the same person that suggested the idea of splitting the council up into groups. Phoenix, Justin thought it was. It was a strong argument. You have a good point. However, that training doesn't cover big groups of people like we have here. People behave differently when in large numbers. Besides, once we have a plan here, it will make people feel far better about the situation, Adam responded. Where does everyone else sit? I am in agreement with Adam. As much as I would like to provide everyone time to process what is going on, the risk of panic is too high, John said. The majority of the room was in agreement with John, including Justin. However, there were a few that did not agree with the plan. Justin was impressed with how well people in the room dealt with such a hot topic. A lot was at stake, and although people disagreed with each other, they still all remained civilized and respected each other's opinions, despite the potential consequences of getting this wrong. Well then, I believe that concludes our meeting. We need to move quickly. We have not a second to waste. We will meet again once one of us has a plan. But before you all go, have any of you decided where to begin searching? John asked. We're sticking to your suggestion, John, Adam replied. We are headed to the research lab to find a scientist or two and see if they can help us. We are going to pick people that we can trust to keep it a secret, responded Phoenix. Justin admired Phoenix's integrity. They were sticking with the plan of secrecy even though they disagreed with it just moments earlier. Excellent to hear, John responded. Everyone then began to get out of their seats and walk out, including Justin and John. The 4 technical council workers headed off to inspect the spaceships, while the other 4 got in a car and headed off to the lab. Chapter 3. 41 hours until impact. John and Justin once again got inside of their car. They headed off in search of anything that may be of use to their cause at the base. They were travelling fast. They couldn't afford to lose time. The road kicked up dust as they flew along, leaving behind a giant plume in their wake. I think the best place to start looking is to the 2 warehouses across the ravine. The warehouses are responsible for the construction of assets on the planet and their maintenance. I suspect they will be filled with all sorts of useful parts and tools, suggested John to Justin. John had an astonishingly calm demeanour. His stoicism impressed Justin. Justin suspected that his seemingly hard outer layer was formed under the pressures of leadership. John carried a huge burden of responsibility. He was in charge of running the entire Solfilius mine. If something happened to the mine here, the vast majority of humanity's spaceships would be rendered inoperable. Because so many people rely on him, John refrained from expressing emotion, for better or worse. He did not want to appear like he was under stress, or give off any impression that he is unfit for the job. It's definitely a good place to start. I'll bet there's all kinds of useful stuff in the warehouses, Justin replied. The main reason I want to head to the warehouses first is that there are many talented engineers there, some of the best we have on this planet. I figured it would be beneficial that we have at least one helping us out, since our head engineer is currently busy trying to help us in other ways, John said to Justin. You have a good point there. The brainpower of an engineer would be very useful to us, Justin replied. John carried on driving towards the warehouses. Justin was deep in thought. He had been doing some thinking about the CME. Did they have no planet evacuation plan in place? He thought it would be best to ask. John, is there any reason there was no planet-wide evacuation plan in place? Justin asked. When the base was first built, a CME event like this one was never on anyone's threat radar. So, the buildings we have here were deemed adequate for protection against environmental threats. However, against something of this magnitude, they stand no chance. My presumption is that we pulled the metaphorical short straw in this scenario we're in, John replied. John's reply made sense, Justin thought to himself. Although Justin had heard about CMEs being powerful enough to take out satellites, or damage a planet's ozone layer, he had never heard of any such thing occurring of this magnitude. If anything, this was a once-in-a-lifetime event. John drove the car down a large ramp into the ravine. They needed to venture across the ravine to get to the warehouses. To their left in the distance, the mining drills were once again in view. Justin could now see them closer. His mind had not changed about them one bit. In fact, he thought they looked even uglier up close. They were caked in rust and debris. The drills had clearly been at it for years. Justin knew a little bit about how the NFMC extracted the precious staminite from the ground. The workers on Solfilius would firstly find a suitable spot for drilling. Then, they would assemble a large frame to support the drill. The drills were modular, and could be assembled and disassembled relatively easily, a bit like a carnival ride back on Earth. Next, the drill would be assembled and fitted onto the frame. Normally they will keep the drill in place to mine for a few months before it then needs to be moved again. Typically because the hole it has been drilling has run out of staminite to mine. Afterwards, they fill in the hole with rock and sand from the nearby area. Justin wanted to strike up a conversation with John about the drills, because he was interested in the mining process. However, he thought now may not be the best time. Both had an extremely important job to do. John had driven the car to the other side of the ravine now, and was heading up the ramp on the other side. They were getting close to their destination now. The car eventually made its way onto the top, and they could now see two large warehouses in the distance next to each other. The one on the left was the construction and fabrication warehouse, where they were headed to first. Justin, as I'm sure you are aware, it is of utmost importance that we do not raise suspicion or let anything get out about what we are here for. Thankfully, I know a few of the talented engineers here well enough to trust that they will keep our secret under wraps, John informed Justin. You can count on me to keep it a secret, Justin replied. Justin had never been into the construction and fabrication warehouse before, but he assumed it was big and that a lot of people worked there. As the car approached the warehouse, Justin could see what it looked like better. From the outside, it looked like it was in worse shape than a lot of the other buildings around the place. The outer walls were covered in rust. The fine dust of Solfilius had been swept across the building for many years, which in turn stained the lower section of the walls a brownish-orange colour. There were 3 doors into the warehouse, 2 smaller ones and 1 large central one. The larger door was for transporting exceptionally large components in and out of the warehouse. The 2 smaller doors were for people and for smaller components. Having these types of buildings here is essential for work to continue throughout the day here. Temperatures regularly soared during the day to levels that made it near impossible to work. The shelter provided by these helped to mitigate the heat substantially. The bumpy dirt road terminated as John and Justin reached the tarmac outside of the warehouse. John parked the car near one of the smaller doors on the left. Justin and John put on their respirators and headed inside. John pressed a button on the wall of the warehouse and the door opened. It lifted itself up, revealing an airlock room. John and Justin walked inside and the door shut behind them. After the airlock cycle, the door in front of them opened up into the warehouse. Justin took a good moment to take in his surroundings. There was a lot going on inside. There were people all over the place, doing all kinds of work. The sounds of welding crackled throughout the building. There were multiple large overhead cranes attached to the ceiling, most of which were in use. Multiple large structural beams were being constructed. All of this sparked Justin's interest. Clearly, they were building something big. What are they building in here? Asked Justin. There is an increasing need for staminite as humanity begins to expand further into space. We are currently building a 4th drill to keep up with demand. As much as I would like to go into further detail, we unfortunately don't have a lot of time to discuss, John responded. The first engineer I would like to speak to is Abigail. She is the senior engineer on site here. I know her well and I trust her. The solutions she brings forth to the various problems we encounter here never cease to amaze me. There is a concern that I have with asking her for help, however, John said. And what might that be? Justin asked in return. She handles pressure poorly. Putting the kind of pressure we were about to put on her could easily overwhelm her, John said to Justin. At first, Justin was put on edge by John's decision. John was enlisting the help of someone who worked poorly under pressure to do a very high-pressure job. If that job was not done properly, it could cost many lives. However, he trusted John and his years of experience in the interstellar frontier. I trust your judgment on this. We all have our flaws, I suppose, Justin replied in an assured tone. Justin realised it was very important that he and John figure out a way to ease her into this. Do you have any idea on how we can mitigate the stress for her? Asked Justin. I know Abigail quite well. She works in a very specific way. She can easily be overwhelmed by her surroundings, so she rarely leaves her office. I think the best way we can support her is by providing her with what she needs to work most efficiently and under as little stress as possible, John replied. Justin thought about how John was always quick to come up with a good idea. His quick thinking and level-headedness put him at ease. Her office is on the other side of the warehouse, John stated. Justin followed John's lead. They walked along a pathway that cut through the middle of the warehouse. The workers kept this space clear for ease of access. On John and Justin's left were a series of heavy-duty pieces of machinery for construction purposes. There were lathes, drills, and other kinds of fabrication machinery. To Justin's right was a large central storage area for materials of all shapes and sizes. Further in the distance was a large series of storage racks that contained various handheld tools. To the far side of the warehouse was a small building inside of the warehouse that appeared to be some kind of electronics lab, most likely for production or maintenance of basic electronic equipment. One of the workers in the warehouse caught Justin's eye. He was staggering around the workshop. A few workers were staring at him. As Justin got closer, he recognised him. It was his friend, Derek. Derek was a worker on Solfilius. He was a friend of Justin. The two of them met in high school. Justin approached Derek. From this distance, Justin could now make out his roughened skin and long blonde hair. "Hey Justin, how you doing, man?" he said to Justin, heavily slurring his speech. Derek leant in to greet Justin and pat him on the back, but fell into Justin, nearly knocking him over. Justin stood upright and began to hold him up so he wouldn't fall flat on his face. He looked worse for wear, and his breath reeked of alcohol. Justin knew he had an alcohol problem, but obviously it had gotten worse since he last saw him. Justin looked over at John, who looked like he was about to explode. Justin had been struggling to get a read on John, but this time it was clear as day how he was feeling. "Derek, are you drunk?" asked Justin, upon immediately realising he had asked a stupid question. It was clear as day that he was. "I'm not drunk. I'm hammered," he responds smugly, while barely sounding comprehensible. John eyed off two nearby workers. "You two, can you deal with this man for us? My apologies if you're in the middle of something, but we have some extremely important business to attend to," John asked the two nearby workers, trying his hardest to keep cool. They both obliged, walking over to take Derek off of their hands. They seemed rather keen to get him out of here. They were probably both worried that he was going to get someone hurt, Justin thought. Justin was both surprised, but also not by this incident. He didn't realise how bad Derek's alcohol problem had become, but the fact that he was drunk at work didn't take him aback. The workers took Derek by the arms and escorted him out of the warehouse. "Come on, man, loosen up a little," slurred Derek at John. "Derek, was it? I'm sending you home the next opportunity I get. Your position here has been terminated," John yelled. Justin was disappointed by what had just unfolded in front of him. Derek could be reckless sometimes. This was a step up from his normal behaviour. To add to all of this, he had just lost his job. Justin felt sorry for Derek, but Derek had no one else but himself to blame. He turned up drunk. What puzzled him, however, was how he got drunk in the first place. He must have been making his own on the surface of Solfilius, because alcohol isn't sold or distributed here. Justin figured it was safe to rule out smuggling, because security was extremely tight at his gateway. John looked like he was beginning to calm down. "Let's get going. Time is of the essence," said John, in an attempt to move along. The pair began to walk towards Abigail's office once more. "Did you know him?" John asked Justin. "He was a friend of mine from high school. I went to the same school in Australia as him for a couple of years as an exchange student, before returning to Canada. I always knew he had an alcohol problem, but I never realised how bad it had gotten. I offered my support to help him with his addiction. Over the past few months, however, we drifted a bit. We were still friends, but we talked less after we both got busy with work. Over that time, he must have fallen back into drinking. I guess he figured out how to make his own alcohol on Solfilius," Justin replied. "I'm sorry about what just unfolded," John replied. "It's not your fault, of course, but thank you," replied Justin. "I am sorry for making the decision to fire him too. Unfortunately, I was left with no choice. Behaviour like that in a dangerous work environment like this required my action. Someone could have gotten seriously hurt, including Derek himself," John said to Justin. Justin wasn't mad at John's decision at all. He had every reason to fire Derek. "That's okay, John, don't be. You did what you needed to do. It might even help him to push him away from alcohol," Justin replied. The pair had now reached the other side of the factory. Abigail's office was up a flight of stairs. John and Justin walked up the stairs to her office. John knocked on the door. The door to Abigail's office then slid open. Abigail was sitting inside, working on some blueprints that were scattered all over her computer screen. Abigail was small in stature. She had short pink hair and blue eyes that stood out. She turned around on her office chair to face John and Justin. "Hello," she said, greeting the pair without eye contact while she focused on her work. "Hello, Abigail. This is Justin. He is here from the Solfilius Orbital Gateway. There is something urgent that we need your help with," replied John. "What do you need my help with?" she replied. Abigail began to fidget with her fingers. "I need you to lock the door first. This is confidential information. It is very important you listen closely. From my understanding, this room is secure, and there are no cameras or recording devices in here, so this will be a suitable location for our discussion, replied John. Okay, she simply responded. Her fidgeting had sped up somewhat after hearing this. She pressed a button just above her desk, locking the door. Justin noted that Abigail was a person of few words. Justin figured she didn't like to talk much. However, maybe she was just nervous, he thought. Abigail, you were a very talented engineer. What I am about to tell you might put substantial stress on you, but you need to remain calm, John began with. Okay, she murmured nervously, facing the door. Her fidgeting sped up. There is a coronal mass ejection heading for the planet in 2 days. Chapter 4. 39 hours until impact. Abigail began to breathe heavily. Justin could tell she was starting to feel very stressed now. I am going to the break room. I need a minute, she said to John and Justin, clearly panicking. She pressed the button to unlock her office door and pushed her way through John and Justin like they weren't even there. She walked out of her office and down the stairs out of John and Justin's sight. John looked like he was about to say something or try to stop her, but he chose not to. Should we go after her? Justin asked. She will be back soon. Following or harassing her could stress her out more, John replied. Justin hoped Abigail was okay. He knew how stressful this must be for her. He just hoped that she would be back soon. They had very little time. Justin could feel himself getting tense and stressed. He completely understood why Abigail reacted the way she did, however. He had experienced a similar feeling to what she was going through right now, just earlier today. Justin figured it would be a good idea to strike up conversation with John to take his mind off of things for a little bit. The pair had nothing else to do while they waited for Abigail to come back, after all. Justin always wanted to know more about the mine here, so he figured it would be a good conversation starter. John, how do they process the staminite ore after they ship it off of Solfilius? Justin asked. Why do you ask? John replied, looking a little puzzled. Justin figured he was confused by the out-of-the-blue question. Well, I thought it would be good to take our minds off of all of this for a bit while we wait for Abigail to come back, Justin replied. Very well then, John replied back. As I'm sure you're aware, they ship it over to Medusa. I don't know much about the process. Medusa isn't my domain, and another overseer is in control of the facility there. The NFMC processes it off-site for a reason. Medusa is small, so the gravity there is a lot weaker. It makes moving around the heavy ore a lot easier. It's the closest planet to Coronis too, so it receives a lot more solar radiation than Solfilius. Staminite processing is an energy-intensive process, so the radiation provides plenty of solar power. The usage of solar panels avoids the hassle of transporting DT fuel all the way out here for fusion reactors, John replied, while Justin listened intently. It's fascinating to hear about the process behind it all. Honestly, if I had my time over, I would have studied something in engineering or science, Justin replied. It is an excellent field to get into. There are almost always job vacancies here on Solfilius if you were ever looking for a career change, John replied. I'll keep that in mind, Justin replied. Justin took a look around Abigail's room. It was very neat and organised. It looked like everything had its own place. The room was very clean. Justin could not spot a single mark or speck of dust. It was a welcome break from the rusted drab that covered every inch of this planet. Justin could easily see why Abigail spent so much time here. Justin spotted a map of the planet on Abigail's computer monitor. It seemed to be a plan of how the workers were going to be moving the components of the new drill down into the ravine. Judging from what he could make out on the image, it looked like moving the drill would be a mammoth of a task. Alongside the map were a bunch of other tabs with various documents and drawings on them. From what Justin could see, it looked like Abigail had been keeping herself very busy recently. Setting up this new drill must be a lot of work for her. Suddenly, a small light next to Abigail's office door turned green, followed by a clicking sound. The door slid open and Abigail walked inside. I feel better now, but I am still stressed, Abigail said in her distinctive tone of voice. I am glad you feel better now, Abigail. I understand how much pressure I just put you under, and I am truly sorry. However, I promise you all of this is not in vain, and I am very confident that you can help us. We will provide as much support as you need to perform your job, if you choose to accept our offer, John replied. There are a few things that will not work. The Ankylos that we have on the planet cannot carry everyone off. Sending out for a call for help will not work. A communications cache will not arrive on any planet or ship for them to have enough time to help us. Building a shelter or hiding under an already existing building will not work. The CME will be too powerful and it will destroy anything that we can hide under or build in 2 days. Moving to the other side of the planet will not work. The CME will reach us there. Hiding underground will not work. Judging from our current maps and scans of the planet, there are only a few caves, but none of them are big enough to fit anyone or are deep enough to avoid the heat. Evacuating everyone into the Solfilius orbital station will not work. There is not enough room in the station to fit everyone, and the station cannot move from its current orbit out of the CME anyway, Abigail blurted out, trying her best to get out as much information as possible. Justin was shocked at how quickly Abigail was able to rule out all those options in just 10 minutes. Justin looked at John. He looked impressed, but not surprised. It seems like his choice of help was a good one. Abigail, that's very impressive. Did you figure all that out while you were out of the office? Justin asked. I did on my walk back after I calmed down, Abigail responded. Justin was now even more impressed than he was before. Abigail, do you have any ideas on how we can get off this planet in 2 days? John asked. I was just getting to that. About 2 kilometers from here is a Bronto. It is a very big ship that was once used to transport the Staminite ore, but after the introduction of the Ankylos, the Bronto was replaced, as the Ankylos were cheaper to run and maintain. It's in a state of disrepair, but we might be able to get it in working condition within 2 days if we work hard enough, replied Abigail. Justin felt a wave of relief flow over his body. It seemed like they now had a feasible plan that also had a good chance of working. Justin noticed that John's eyes seemed to light up. It looked like a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders too. Abigail, that is an excellent idea. I had completely forgotten it was abandoned there after the introduction of the Ankylos, John replied, his spirits clearly uplifted. It seemed rare that John would ever forget something so potentially useful like the abandoned Bronto. He was always very put together. He was under substantially more pressure than he was normally, however. Justin assumed that everything going on around him caused it to slip his mind. Well then, it seems like we have a plan. I am going to contact the other council members and organise a meeting for this afternoon. We can discuss our findings there and figure out how we want to approach this, John stated to Justin and Abigail. John took out his phone. The NFMC phones provided to the staff on Solfilius allowed them to communicate anywhere on the planet. They functioned as a mix between a conventional two-way radio, regular Earth phone, and much more. Justin had one too. John spoke into the phone, addressing the Solfilius council members. Everyone, we may have found a solution.